being the prompt public servants we are, we'll start on time. I want to welcome lots of new faces to our meeting today, Redwood Coast Transit Authority. I'll call the meeting to order at this time. And Nicole, would you please call roll?
Director Short?
Here.
Director Smith?
Here.
Chairman Gitlin?
Here. And we do have a quorum of 3. We have 2 absent, but we are good to go, and we can start. And Joe, I wonder if you'd honor us by conducting the Pledge of Allegiance this afternoon. I'd like to take this opportunity, it's not on the agenda, to recognize the individual Elizabeth Burrows, who has departed our physical earth and remains within us. She was a constant, a variable here, always here, and her smiling face is an indelible impression on my cerebrum, and she'll be missed. So I think, okay, we have Director Keim is also here. So at this time, and Joe, at this time, I'd like to also remind us in the announcements or in your presentation to please offer the alternative for a recognition plaque at the Senior Center where the Redwood Coast Transit stop is, and in her memory. So please let the record show that Director Keim is here, and I will at this time entertain a motion to approve the minutes of August the 16th, 2017.
Chair, I make a motion that we approve the minutes.
We have a second for that.
I will second.
And a second. Are there any comments from the public comments with regard to the minutes from the August 16th meeting? Seeing none, I will move on and ask for a polling of the vote.
Director Keim? Yes. Director Smith?
Yes.
Director Short?
Yes.
Chairman Gitlin?
That would be yes. All right, at this time, at 3:32, we'll open up comments to public comment. So please address the dais if you'd like to address our group on any item not on the agenda. If it's on the agenda, we'll get to you and you'll have an opportunity. But if you wish to speak to an item that is not listed on this agenda, please approach now and identify yourself, and we will let you speak for 3 minutes. I don't see anything, so we will close public comment and move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda has 2 items in it, both adopting resolutions. 5A is a resolution 2017-18-03 approving the Redwood Coast Transit Authority's 2017 update of the Title VI Civil Rights Plan. Excuse me. And the other consent agenda item is 5B, 2017-18-04, which approves the Redwood Coast Transit's Code of Conduct and authorizes the general manager and operations contractor to implement that same. At this time, I will ask the public to come up and address these 2 items only if you wish to make a comment on these 2 consent agenda items. Seeing no public comment, I'll move it back to board discussion. Motion and second. Consent. Okay, we have a motion from Director Short to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
And seconded by Director Smith, and we will move on for the vote on consent only.
Director Short?
Yes.
Director Keim? Yes. Director Smith?
Yes.
Chairman Gitlin?
Yes. Okay, and we'll move on to item number 6, update on October 1st, 2017, implementation of the increase in adult cash fares and new discounted cash and pass categories for seniors, disabled, and youth students in zonal fare structure. Mr. Rye, would you please update us?
My pleasure. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and board members. The board approved this fare structure change back at the August meeting, and since then we finalized the design of the various different new passes that will be available to people, as well as updated both of the regional routes brochure and the the city routes brochure to reflect the new fare categories. And so the 2 brochures are in final proofing phase at the printers, so I wanted to hold off on that until we got through today, because it's been a busy day of meetings in case there was any last-minute changes. The passes are already in production, so it's my hope when I come up next week, I'll be passing through, so I'm going to bring them up with me. So we'll have them approximately the 27th of September in time for sales for the October 1st is the effective date when the new passes become effective. So it's been quite a lift, but we have the array of passes up. We just circulated through operations a rider alert flyer to remind passengers that this change happens starting October 1st, because some of them may have forgot or not followed the board action in the last 3-4 months as we discussed this. So that flyer will be going up on the buses this week, so everyone will get some further notice that this change is coming. In operations, dispatch has been aware of it and educating folks about the upcoming changes over the phone and stuff when they call in. So basically, that's the update on it. We're ready to go. It's a lot of work, but we'll at least have new brochures, and the passes themselves will be ready by the end of the month.
Authority Commissioners, do you have any comments, questions, or feedback for Mr. Rye or the public with regard to the update on the October 1st implementation of increase in adult fares and the new discounted cash and pass categories for seniors, disabled, youth students, and zonal fare structure? Any comments from, yes, Commissioner Smith?
Sure, I have a question. Mr. Rye, I'm just curious, you mentioned that you're putting out alerts to the passengers. How's that going so far? Are you getting good feedback about the fare changes? And are they understanding, what's going to be happening with the changes?
Well, the alert that was going to go out probably tomorrow, because we were running it through operations to make sure everybody was on the same page today, and I was meeting over at the office today. So, but some of the feedback from prior meetings and when people have called in has been generally positive, especially about the more reasonable, affordable fares going to the south with the zonal fare structure. That's been very positive.
Any other commissioner comments, questions, or feedback with regard to this? Seeing
No,
none,
thank you.
I'll move on to public comments on this. If you wish to make a comment on this, the update, Mr. Rye's comments, the implementation increase in adult cash fares and new discounted cash and pass categories for seniors, disabled, and youth students, and the zonal fare structure, please come to the dais now and let us hear your comments. Please approach. And when you do come up, and since these are matters of public record, please state your name and whether you are a city or county resident.
Richard Tejan. I am a city resident, also a driver for RCT. I just have a question as to how do I know as a driver if a person is disabled or even a senior? Are they going to show us a card so that they get that discount? And I wait for the card to come out?
Valid point. I'm going to refer to Mr. Rye for, have we addressed this issue of someone possibly presenting themselves as disabled when in fact they're not, just to glean a better fare? Have we addressed that issue at all?
Yes, they have to show proof of disability and age. Driver's license, passport is the age, obviously. And for disability, there's probably a number of things we can accept, but I'll pull off a list and put it in the driver's break room. So no proof, then no discount, because the fares are already low anyway.
Okay. Is that, for you, Mr. Tejan, does that clear up this?
That's clear. It could slow down the routes for a while because people aren't aware they have to show a card, or they're digging down in a purse or something for a card. So it will slow down the drivers.
Well, let's take a look at this and see how we can be proactive on this.
Well,
During the I'm sorry, go right ahead, and then you
Part of the advertising campaign, when you're talking about the lower fares, and when you would like your lower fare, you need to present your driver's license and proof of age, etc. It's all part of the,
during the orientation process?
yeah,
Okay.
when you're reaching out to the public.
Okay, but that's a dynamic that sometimes changes, and during this process, not everyone gets the message. So I think this is maybe Commissioners, do you have any other suggestions on how this can be addressed? About possibilities of, we don't want to slow service down to a point where it's problematic, but at the same time, you've got to make your job as easy as possible. You have a difficult job as it is.
Yeah, I think it might be a learning curve like we talked about for a while, and then hopefully there'll be a comfort level, and hopefully it'll get easier for you and easier for the passengers as well, I would hope, over time.
Mr. Rye, do you see possibly posting in the coaches a sign for disabled and/or seniors to be prepared to identify your age and/or with a valid license or a disabled credential card? You see
Yeah,
that?
I think that's exactly what we would do, is acceptable forms of ID. It's a disability, everyone knows an ID is a driver's license or a state-issued identification card with birth date and photo ID or a passport. The age is relatively simple. I think the more complex one is proving the disability. So we'll take FTA guidance and we'll put a list of acceptable IDs and just post that flyer in the bus. They'll be up for many months, so we'll probably laminate some of these flyers because they'll need to be up for a while.
Mr. Tejan, does that help to identify and address this issue?
That helps. I was concerned about that because everybody's going to be disabled, or that's the drivers have commented to me, that there are a lot of people that will get on the bus and they want that very much discounted fare. So we'll have to wait until they prove that they're disabled. And of course, we get to know the people in the city that are disabled, and I'll let them go ahead and get on at that price. But we will have to see some proof for a while.
I think I, as a commissioner, would appreciate your keeping in contact through your superiors if this becomes a problematic situation.
Okay.
So as we go into October, November, December, even the new year, if you see this as, and other drivers are noticing there's an abuse here, please let us know through the appropriate avenues so that we can readdress this.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And are there any additional public comments? Seeing no additional public comments, we will close that. Joe, I do not see there's an action item here. It's a simple update.
That's
Okay, so
correct.
we'll move on 6 to number 7, which is the presentation of fiscal year 2016-17 annual budget report and budget recap. This is a discussion-only item. Welcome, sir.
Thank you,
Okay.
Chair Gitlin and board members. I'm delighted to be here. I'm Dan
Mr. Heron, I want you just to identify yourself because we're on tape.
I'm Dan Heron. I work
Thank
with
you.
Joe on the administration of RCTA. And don't get a chance to come up and do it here so much as be on the computer side of it, which is fairly active, to the point that we're probably not going to be able to cover much more this time than the financial portions of it. We hoped to do the annual report with full data on operating things. That will be at your next board meeting, because we would like to spend a little more time on looking at some of the difficulties that we've had this year. I can go back and kind of sum up the fact that it's been a very challenging year. This fiscal year that just closed June 30th, because that was the time when we were bidding. We had an open bid, and we were getting new, quite a bit of discussion with Caltrans about the fact that we had asked, the previous management had asked for an extension of a contract to cover the time that it took for the bid. And Caltrans conditioned their approval to the amendment to say, yes, but not for 3 of the months, October, November, and December. They felt that in all good conscience, for them being the financial management for the FTA funds, they were saying you can't spend federal money during those 3 months because we feel that your contract ended September 30th. Now that's pretty hard to do when you've got an operating budget of $1 million to say one quarter of it we're going to take away one of your most significant funding sources. So we've been tussling with how to handle that. They were saying basically, we won't interfere with the fact that you continued to operate your services. You didn't shut down because the board sought legal counsel, which said a contract being honored by both parties is still a contract. So we ran till the end of December before we signed a new contract with First Transit because there were a successful bidder out there. In other words, they were the best bidder on the market. And we will certainly be looking at using local funds to make to cover that running. Now, with the full year period ended, we can bill Caltrans for that year and get our financial money in. But how's it going to work out? We'll get into that in a minute. The most important thing in your packet, you will find a printout of the year in the year's expenses and income. And the interesting thing about that is that it's $1 million expenditure, but we had more money coming in than we had expenditures. So basically, if we can figure out how to bill it correctly, we'll have enough money to pay for all of the services. Now, the next step is what we're engaged in now, and that is taking the each month, the invoices in July, August, September of 2016, and all of the months will be broken out, the expenditures, so that we can pay them. We can allocate those to the different funding sources, being 2 federal grants and our local TDA money. Now, once we get all of the individual invoices laid out by month, then we can see how problematic it's going to be to spend local money only on those 3 months and claim more money on the 3 quarters that we have the right to pull on 2 federal grants for. We seem to be okay. At this particular point, we have not finished that. There's some reconciliation issues with the money. But the strategy that we applied to this and are applying to this is we went back and we're looking not just at the contract with First Transit and fuel, which were adequate categories to portion out in years past, but if we look at all of the costs, advertising, administration, all of the costs that happen each month, we can probably take the invoices that in the 9 months that we can do federal funding and have them paid for by federal funds, leaving us money for the 3 months that we have to cover it with our local money. Now it is predicated on the fact that we need to follow the federal guidelines on expending money too. You can't claim money that you don't have a percentage of local funds to match to, and the match is really pretty hefty. 55% of all of our expenses can be allocated to the feds. The rest of it has to come out of local match. Now, I mentioned strategy number one was to do month-by-month analysis and allocate as much as we can to each of the 2 grants and not touch our local money. That's one strategy. The next strategy that we're applying was to go back and find out how we're doing with the biggest question, which is the intercity bus contract. It's called FDA 5311F. That fund is $300,000 from through our grants. That means a much heftier local match than we typically have money for. So how are we going to handle that? Fortunately, Caltrans has given us an opportunity, we feel, to take care of it, because there is, in the grant contract itself, when they made the final change to give us a full $300,000, they built that grant so that $165,000 of it was federal funds from the FDA, but $134,000 of it was in the form of toll credits, which can serve as our local funding and brings us out of the hole. I'm going to pass out a chart to folks that may clarify that a bit.
Money laundering.
And to the audience, sorry for handouts, but the stuff is still being developed.
Mr. Herron, I'm a little confused.
Sure.
And I'm sure maybe some of the people in our audience might be so. What is the rationale that the federal government would say you can't do something during its prescribed fiscal period, which is the last 3 months ending September 30th?
Yes.
That's new news to me. I'd never heard that before.
Oh, okay.
All right, now, commissioners, is this something you're familiar with? No, sir. So we have a budget, we've approved a budget, we're spending it, allocated as needed during our fiscal period.
Correct.
And then the federal government by edict says, no, you can't do this during the last 25% of your year. Is that what I'm hearing?
I did not realize that was new information to you, but what happened, and I think it's kind of touched on in the staff report, at the beginning of last calendar year, in other words, January 2016, the management at that time had put in a request for an amendment. This is that amendment that never really was approved by Caltrans until when? I guess it was June of that year. The amendment specified we intend to take the whole program out to bid, but we will need an extension of our agreement to cover till the end of the calendar year. In other words, that October, November, and December. Caltrans looked at they never gave us yes or no on that for 7 months, at least 7 months there. And when the approval finally came through, it approved all of the changes with that one exception. They said, fine, there's no problem, but you're going to have to use your own money for those 3 months that are outside of the contract period as we define the contract period. And Caltrans defined the contract period as the 5 years of the contract, and then the extensions of the contract, and then any quarter additions that could be made after 2-year extensions. And they said we were 3 months short. And they said there's no way that we can use the written contract to say that you were okay at October, November, and December. So therefore, you can continue to run, but when you go now to seek the money back, the reimbursement for it, be aware we're going to be looking for that to come out of your local match. Is it in their prerogative? Well, our legal folks were rather irritated by that. They said the standard legal practices, if you have a contract and both sides agree to it, it should stand. However, there were some rocky negotiations there with Caltrans, and that's probably why the end product was we had to live with that. But we did later get our full $300,000 grant. So the dilemma then was we have to make sure that we can show on paper that we have a local match to that grant that is sufficient to pay for those 3 months. Now, the beauty of the thing they call toll credits, and it's fairly new, and only in California as far as I know. The federal government actually treats them as development credits and will honor them as local share, but it's based upon the tolls within all of the toll bridges in California. The basic idea is you set it up to encourage tolls to be paid so that people batch and use carpools and other things. So the funding comes into the state, but is honored by the federal government as something they would pay. So by the end of when we tally this all up, we'll be able to show the lighter green there, 134,000, as our local match and apply for that, and Caltrans will write us a check, hopefully, for the full $300,000. Does that help? It's a very hard thing to grasp. The federal government identifies it as local, but they're willing to pay 100%. In essence, 100% of the $300,000 to us.
Chair, I have a question.
That's still happening, and yeah, with that I can...
Dan, hold on, because we've got questions. It seems as you peel this onion back, my creases in my forehead become more pronounced. So I'm going to defer right now to Commissioner Smith. You have a question about this first? And then if we can interrupt, is it all right? Because I know you're giving a report. Or would you rather finish the report and then let the questions come afterwards?
This is a
It'll
good
be
time.
quick, I hope. Dan, it sounds to me like part of this could have been alleviated by Caltrans being more timely and getting back with you with information. So I'm curious, has Caltrans improved their service to you since this has happened?
I would say yes. And I'll base that on a lot of things. I think Joe was a saint during the time when he was listening to the myriad kinds of things that Caltrans was saying. Well, we'll approve your contract extension, but we want to condition it on this, this, and this, and this. And Joe lived through that, worked with them, and I think what we're seeing is they said, okay, we'll tell them they've got to take this out of local money, but we won't hurt them too badly because the allocation of the 300,000, when they finally made that, left some room in there for us to use their money to match.
Commissioners, any additional comments for Mr. Herron?
Mr. Herron,
On
yes.
what he's, yes, go ahead, Commissioner Short.
You keep using the term match funding, but doesn't sound like it truly is a match, because we don't actually have to expend that. Am I missing something there?
This is the weirdness of it. Yeah, match funding usually says, the federal government says, we want you to participate in services
Correct.
to your thing. So we will only pay 55%. We want you to pay 44% of your service, and that's our local match. Now, in this one exclusion, there aren't many, I've never run into any others, the toll bridges, they both recognize it as a local match, but they honor it as something that they will pay the full amount for. Very strange.
Okay.
Commissioner Kime, do you have any comments at this time? I'm scratching my head because I hear a lot of maybes,
Yeah.
and hopefully they'll pay it. And, you know, again, we've had similar past experiences with bureaucracy that have hurt this authority.
That's right.
And we've had to do, as Joe well knows, we've had to do some back somersaults trying to balance budgets, and it's a little bit problematic.
Yes.
By your report. So what is the best course intervention to avoid this 3-month window where we were even suspect of having used any of this money? Is it spend this money in a 9-month period rather than a 12-month period? Is that what I'm hearing you're saying?
Well, there are two strategies we're applying to it. The first is what you're talking about. We want to account for this money on invoices that came in during the 9 months, but account for the federal portion of it. And then that frees us to use the toll credits to account for that 3-month period.
What's choice two?
Does that address your worries about the ifs in here? Not totally, but we've also done the critical path analysis of what happens if they say no. And we have talked with Caltrans, and the best things that we've heard from them was this would be very surprising if they changed the way they're handling toll credits now. So if we submit this as a mixture of the toll credits and the feds, and some of our TDA, we'll still need about 81,000 of our TDA in there simply because we expended more than $300,000. We spent $381,000 for this particular service. But if we submit it that way and they approve it, we're in good shape because we can actually have money going back, TDA money, to carry over to the big problem that we have coming up in this fiscal year, because there will be further cutbacks here. But if we take a look at the worst possible scenario, we would have to pony up about $48,000 from our TDA carryover funds, in other words, the reserves that we have, which are ample to cover that. So we're covered, but we would much rather this be government money.
So Dan, if my memory serves me correctly, commissioners, please chime in. The budget surplus was about 68,000. Was that what it came out to when the dust settled? Joe, do you recall?
A little more than that,
A little more than that?
yeah. 80.
So that's a
84.
buffer, can be used. I did have some ideas on how otherwise to use that surplus for other services that benefit the public, but apparently with this glitch, we're going to need that as a buffer. Is that?
We'll find out by December.
Okay.
But like I say, I hate to put it as a guesstimate because we don't know what Caltrans will put us through when we submit the request for proposals. But at this point in my discussions with them, I would say it's probably 80% sure that this will go forward smoothly without using that buffer.
80% isn't 100, but, okay, I don't want to interrupt the rest of you, but what is the rest of your report on the budget recap? Do you have any additional information for us?
No, more kind of apologetically, I wish we had better information on the monthly basis to present to you. But the way this thing has come about, we've got to solve some reconciliation problems on the budget, so I didn't want to come in here with a completed form when we haven't done all of that side of it. But I want to leave you with the encouraging signs. We're okay either way, and every indicator I've got after 25 years experience in this stuff says this approach, these two strategies are going to work for us, and we'll have the buffer.
We're out there a little bit on a limb.
Yep.
Do you have additional information on your report before I open up to public comment?
That's it.
Okay, commissioners, before I do open up to the public, do we have any additional comments, questions, or feedback for Mr. Herron? Go ahead,
Mr.
Commissioner
Chair, I
Smith.
have one more question.
You bet.
Dan, looking at the passenger fare revenues, can we make an assumption that because the actual fares collected seem to be lower than what we projected,
Yes.
can we assume that the passenger counts are not as high as they were in the previous year? Can you tie that to ridership?
That's correct.
Okay. And so, of course, we don't know why it's lower, but we can presume it was lower than it was the year before.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Additional comments from commissioners for Mr. Herron on his report?
No, sir.
I'm going to open this up to the public now for any comments on item number 7, which is a budget update from Mr. Dan Herron on the 2016-17 budget. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to make a comment? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back. This is not an action item. I do have some concerns, scratching my head about the 80% this and hopefully that. So I guess we'll just have to hold our breath until December. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah.
To make sure that we don't have a problem to create for Mr. Rye as he comes back to us in January and he says, his opening words, gentlemen and ladies, we have a problem.
Yeah.
And I'm hopeful that will not be the case, and I don't know if it's 80% or 90 or 100.
Right.
I just know that in working with these interagencies, there's sometimes that are unanticipated consequences when you don't expect it. So we're trying to be proactive in solving those problems. So in subsequent meetings, Dan and Joe, please keep us apprised on the likelihood of any possible problems as we move in October. And if we haven't, well, we'll have an October and November, and possibly, I don't know if we'll have a December meeting, but during those 2 subsequent possible 3 meetings, that there is any new information on any possible glitches on this 3-month moratorium, I guess, that you bring it to our attention. So we're good for that.
Keep you informed.
That's item number 7, and we'll move on now. I've seen folks in the audience, and I'm going to ask, because I'm going to go, I think, to number 9. This is the discussion on bus stop options. I'll come back to 8. I have a feeling there's some folks in the audience who'd like to render an opinion, and we're respectful of your time. So I'm going to go from 7 to item number 9, which is, and come back to 8. Nicole, if I end up skipping over, please remind me that I've not done 8. But let's go to 9, which is the discussion of bus stop options on 5th Street near Safeway. So if you would, Joe, if you can get us up to date on what it is, what's the authority done, how has it changed, and what is this authority looking to do to remedy that change, or nothing?
Okay, thank you. Be glad to run this through. over several meetings in the last few months, we faced a related item to what we just walked through, a budget shortfall projected, especially this fiscal year 17-18 that we're in, and what we were going to do about it. So we ultimately agreed upon a package of service reductions that was implemented July 1 that basically filled a hole in the budget, reduced our expenditure levels to better match what we expected to come in for 17-18. We just heard the good news from Mr. Herron that 16-17 came in better than we expected, which is great, but it doesn't fix the ongoing issue that our 17-18 funding was down. I believe the figure was by about 178,000 versus 16-17. So those packages of changes went in July 1st. They included a wide variety of things, but among that, there's also the stuff we do every year to try to fix routes that are running behind, safety issues, this, that, and the other that we just do as a service planning, annual function, routine work. So that also was implemented July 1. So we come out with new schedule brochures with new timetables, new bus stop locations in a few cases, just a couple, and then the service changes that we talked about. We shorten the nights, we shorten the mornings, Saturdays, dispatch hours, the package of reductions that led to balancing the 17-18 budget. So part of that was to put all of our local Crescent City routes, we have 4 of them, numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, color-coded, blue, red, green, and gold. So those were all running behind, and they run on half-hour loops, meeting back at the cultural center, and then they turn into another bus. So basically, there's 2 buses providing 4 routes on an hour loop, so each route gets provided once an hour. It takes a half an hour to do. All the routes were running late, causing missed connections at Cultural Center, drivers not to be able to get out of their vehicles and have a break, and just the system was melting down. It's from over time. This happens with transit systems if you don't do service planning every year. If you add on, for example, I think one of the things that changed over the years since Mark maybe turned his attention to the system was the addition of the Walmart and the Summer Creek apartment stops. That takes 2, 3, 4 minutes to go back in there and back out. That affects 2 of our routes, 3 now. Things like that all over, all of a sudden the routes can't stay on time. So a package of changes, we made a modification, we changed an alignment over on the west side of one of the routes. The Safeway route was part of it that we consolidated. Before, we were driving through the parking lots of both the Safeway shopping center and the one just north of 5th Street where the Rite Aid's at, and picking up in front of both doorways and then exiting carefully out, and that was taking a lot of time. So one of the ways to bring the routes back on time was to stop doing that and to use 5th Street and pick people up in between the 2 stores. So that was basically a big part of the changes that were implemented on July 1 that started making the routes improve their on-time performance. There's other subtle things that watered it down or changed it too. We started serving the Oregon apartments with the green route because it had running time that could spare, where the blue and red were horribly behind. So we made a bunch of changes, but one of which within that package of local service changes, which is what staff does if they're paying attention each year, one of those changes was the Safeway stop. So then at the board's request, you wanted an update on what we did. So we consolidated former parking lot, front door stops, which is common for dial-a-ride, but not for fixed route. We consolidated them into an on-street stop, which is currently on the, was temporarily placed on the Rite Aid side of the street, which is the north side of 5th, facing westbound. And that was chosen because that driveway has there's a sidewalk there with an ADA ramp, so folks, it's more accessible. Whereas if you look over on the Safeway side, right now, there's no ADA ramps on the driveway by the front of the store. So initially, until we could figure out what we were going to do there, we put it on the Rite Aid side, just because it's more accessible. And that's what's happened. So the early results in the staff report shows you that the routes are running more on time. There's still more work to be done. I believe the sampling, we did a before and after, and thank you to Kevin and his operations staff for doing the before-after study as far as what time the buses arrive back at Cultural Center after making their loops. So we've seen slight improvement, but again, there's other things that happened elsewhere in the system. But the Safeway thing definitely is one of the major time savers that happen. But each route's doing a couple minutes better. And that means drivers are able to get out of their vehicles and take a restroom break, or there's more time for passengers to transfer and just for the system to relax and be sustainable. before they were getting in, after they were supposed to start their next trip, and just cascading downhill all day long on most routes. So if you look at the little chart on the bottom of page 2, you'll see that our red route, route number 2, still has problems. The bus is still getting in an average of 10 seconds after it's supposed to leave on its next trip, when ideally it should be there 5 minutes before. That would be a good target for a 5-minute recovery period for the drivers to get a break and for passengers to transfer. So red still not do it. It was worse. It was almost a full minute late before. So we've saved a minute, but we still have work to do on red route 2. We've saved over 2 minutes of recovery time on the blue route 1, which is the one that it's kind of the companion route with route 2 that also serves Walmart and all that. Green's actually deteriorated by a minute. It used to get almost 5 minutes break time. It was our lone star before, and now it's averaging 4 minutes break time back at Cultural Center. That's the one that we added bi-directional service to the senior apartments in Oregon, so that's what's taken up some more time for it. There's also more trips to Safeway being provided, which is not mentioned in any of the, until this point, but we're able to duck in there with each route now at this point, whereas before only, I believe, 2 or 3 of them stopped at Safeway of the 4. So looking at the future, what do we do with that? We obviously, fixed routes always balancing between convenience, accessibility, and on-time performance. So we have been working with, we've got a quote from a contractor, discussed it with the city, although more discussions need to occur, of what it would take to establish the stop just across the street on the Safeway side. That's the path I recommend we go on. That'll be, right now it's about 200 feet from the door to the new stop, and this would be about 150 feet. We would construct a pad where we could put a shelter there from the rain, and that would both keep the speed up that we want to do for the efficiency of serving both sides of the shopping center with a single stop. But there does need to be some improvements access-wise there. We need to have a path of travel to the front of the store that's ADA accessible, so it means slope, and right now that's not there on that side. That's why we temporarily put it on the north side. But it looks to be like a relatively affordable fix, so we're getting quotes on that from a contractor. And it could be done as soon as this fall if the board supports going in that direction. In your packets also a letter from Bill Lonsdale outlining his take on the situation. And we don't have the quote. We just met with the contractor this morning out there to outline the project, the first contractor, and the bid's pretty affordable. He gave me a ballpark. So at this point, we're seeking direction on this. It's a fine line between convenience and efficiency and fixed route. Again, anyone that's taken Dollar Ride is already getting dropped off at the front of all shopping centers. So this really pertains to fixed route. And to get on a fixed route bus, you've got to get to a bus stop. So around the community bus stops are spaced at least 1,000 or more feet apart. So people have to walk just to get to the bus in the first place. So this is not the only place they're not picked up right in front of their front door. Dan?
I'd like to add a little bit to what Joe's saying. You have really one of the best kinds of systems to have for a small city. The pulse route, I call them pulses. The buses come together, the people can transfer and take any of the 4 buses to get anywhere they want to go in the whole city. And Mrs. Johnson, who lives over here, will proudly point to her bus stop, and she says, at 11 minutes after the hour, that's where I go, and I can go anywhere. And so it's important to have the pulse work, particularly if you get to the pulse point, but the other bus is not there, the bus you need. Then you sit there for an hour waiting for the rest of it. So a suite system is when they all meet. Now, unfortunately, that's what happens the first time that you design the thing. But over time, people ask, hey, it's in front of my store, I'd like a stop here. And it gets delayed and delayed. It falls off that, and you have to trim. So when Joe told me he was going to take a look at trimming or tuning up the routes, I was delighted, because we need to get back on the pulse system. Going to a 45-minute thing, I have personal experience with, and it's probably not a good idea. I'd like to talk further in some other forum about that, but a system I know did it, went from their pulse routes, instead of shortening the routes, they set up 45-minute headways, and they needed a very complex schedule, everyone who rode it, and it was universally hated by the riders. What they did was show that hatred by going from 1.2 million riders down to 640,000 riders in 2 years. So until they got back on the pulse system, we didn't have it. The pulse systems are efficient, they're reliable. More than that, the people love the fact that they can do them on a regular basis. Now, we've got this is a good time to look at it, and Mr. Lonsdale is really makes some very good points in his letter. I think it would be very useful to have him involved in the survey that is coming up, where we actually go out and get his ideas, but everyone else's ideas to bring back to you. So if that makes sense, I put that out as a suggestion.
Thank you, Dan. I think what I'd like to do before we bring it back to the board is I'd like to hear from the public. This is an issue that's kind of drawn some attention, one of convenience, and I understand the pulse system. You've explained that very well, Dan. But we have some unhappy riders who are being inconvenienced by this change. There's another issue that I didn't hear mentioned about the shopping carts and the locking of the wheels that you can't even get across the street, which is problematic. So we're here to serve the public. We're not here, I appreciate meeting a schedule, but we're here to accommodate the public, and often their issues and their voices have to be heard and addressed. So I'm going to open it up to public comment at this time. Those of you who wish to address our authority on the status quo or the change, or what you'd like to see happen on the shopping center stop in front of the Jed Smith Center, please approach and let us hear your thoughts. So public comment is open.
Mr. Chair, and seeing Mr. Lonsdale approach the dais, I would request that we allow him to exceed his 3 minutes. He has obviously put a lot of effort and study into this subject, and I'd like to hear
So noted, and I
all
was prepared to do that as he moved to the 3, and I was prepared to ask this board, shall we continue? But I guess we have universal appeal, that go for it, but please, within the half hour, please let us know. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah,
Mr. Chairman, members of
reasonable.
the board, my name is Bill Lonsdale, and I live in Crescent City. You all already have received my correspondence, and that's pretty much what I think about what has happened and also what ought to be considered. Now, staff has come a long way in conceding in their staff report that the obstacles that exist at the end of the driveway are problematic, and they've agreed to look at, I think they've agreed to look at bringing the stopover onto the south side of Fifth Street. That's good. However, getting to that stop is something that needs to be considered. If you look at the picture that was in the staff report, you'll find at the edge of the driveway, there's a clump of vegetation there. And just beyond that vegetation, in the area where 2 cars are parked diagonally, is, in my view, the best place to put the ADA compliant pathway to the shelter. And then the shelter, as they've indicated, is going to be put onto a pad that will have to be constructed. And that would be a good outcome, but it's going to be a little bit expensive. One of the options that was proposed was that they consider picking passengers up in the fire lane and driveway that exists between the Safeway and that stop location. At that point, they're only about 4 meters from a covered shelter. They have to get 4 meters through the rain to get on the bus if the bus stops right there. And then the bus can continue on down the driveway, exit behind Safeway, and either use their chosen path behind the Rite Aid or turn back onto Fifth Street to get on 101 North. That's a suggestion made respectfully. But I do appreciate that they've decided to move the shelter and stop location closer to Safeway. That's a step in the right direction. The question that I have at this point is, what do we do in the meantime? Do we leave the pickup point across Fifth Street where it is now with all of the problems that are associated with it? Or do we find a temporary fix until the proper stop and shelter can be constructed? My suggestion there is try out that driveway. It's no construction required. It's an at-level boarding point, and the only problem you'll have there is in the really heavy part of the rainy season when that roof drain pipe starts to leak, and you'll have a puddle, but that can be handled. The other potential problem is we have to get Safeway to agree not to park their big semis blocking that fire lane, and the city has cognizance over that anyway because it is a fire lane. And Safeway would probably have to give up 2 parking places to allow for the sidewalk to be built and to allow for a cart retrieval area to exist. So people can take their carts to that point and then carry their groceries onto the bus from there. So I do appreciate what's been done, and I would respectfully make the recommendation that the alternative that I just proposed be considered. Finally, with respect to pulse systems, if all routes are on the same timeline, the pulse can still be done. And we're worried about breaks for our drivers. We're worried about missing connections. The 30-minute headway is the kiss of death for all of that in this particular community. If you look at the time chart on page 2, if Safeway were the only problem, there would be a uniformity in the delays, but there isn't, either before the change or after the change. And that suggests to me that there are other factors at work than just Safeway. So I think that I would be very grateful if in the future your board would take up the matter of the 30-minute headway. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lonsdale. Are there any additional public comments at this time? Seeing no public comments, I'll bring it back to the board and ask for input from commissioners on this subject and how we best address this. So, commissioners?
Mr. Chair, I have a question. And this might be for Joe. I'm looking at the map, the aerial map, and with Mr. Lonsdale's suggestion that you pull around, the side of Safeway there, it looks like the bus probably couldn't go down Fifth and turn right and then turn down that parking lot because of the brake angle. So they would, I guess my point is, to do what Mr. Lonsdale's suggesting, they would have to go through the parking lot from way down and then come across and then make their right. Is that, did you guys look at that, that angle, that perspective?
I think you're right. We haven't taken a bus through there, but it looks to be hard to make that tight right and then a tight left right after that.
There's a landscape, there's a tree there Mr. Lonsdale
Yes,
talked about.
like a bulb out, yeah.
So the bus couldn't go down Fifth and then turn left and go in. They would have to go down the front of that parking lot, which is part of what you guys are trying to.
Right, what we're trying to get
Is
out
that
of,
right?
yes, that's correct.
Because of the time delay.
And then there's backing up, there's potential of vehicles backing out of those spots along the fire lane too. That's, wouldn't be ideal.
Okay.
It depends on the size of the bus though, too. Do you have the larger bus go through those Safeway stop, or is it the medium one?
These are the medium ones usually. Although the locals almost always get the medium-sized buses.
Okay, so the medium one might be able to.
We can test it if that's the board's wishes.
Well.
You know,
we
again,
just-
that would be splitting hairs over maybe 50 feet or so difference from just constructing the new stop as we recommend doing, which would be, 100 and some feet. This might save half of that.
Which
but
would be
then-
awfully nice if you've got a cart full of groceries in the rain.
Yeah. I agree with Mr. Lonsdale's recommendation of the cart retrieval area and taking a second parking spot. If we have to ask for one, which I believe we do, the way we scoped the project today, we would take at least one spot for the path of travel to the store. So if we could get two, there would be room then for a cart corral, which is a great idea.
Additional comments from our commissioners? None? I have a question, and I'm always looking about what we did before and what precipitated this move. If we went back to the original stop, which was right in front of the Safeway, is that an option that would compromise safety? Because that's what I think we did before. We dropped people off for ingress or egress right in front of the Safeway store to load their groceries up. The cart retrieval process was not a problem there, and then we moved on. We changed that because I think there was an issue having to do with the addressing of safety issues. Do we have any data to show there were even close calls there with pedestrians being compromised? I'm not looking to invite a problem, but while we explore this new option with the new, in the south side of 5th Street with the covered parking, could we not consider moving this back to its original location after we've decided we want to fully explore the new location for the 5th Street? In other words, instead of keeping status quo across the street, which doesn't solve any immediate problems, it allows it to go on, and we actually just revert to the same condition which before the bus comes up, stops, lets people on, lets people off, and there's a delay there, people getting on and off the bus. Is that something that we could consider without compromising public safety?
Well, I can ask Kevin to talk about the risk side of things and operations. I don't have a volume of drivers riding down every close call they've had with cars backing into them or pedestrians running in front of them, but you can imagine it's happened, and even once is too many, but I'm sure it's been a lot more than that.
Well,
Driving through that whole parking lot.
I'm looking to do is to get that data, and if there is in fact a real public safety issue, and I think there is, that's what precipitated this move to begin with, then I think that has to be recognized. But what I'm trying to do is satisfy a public who's asking for convenience. And I'm trying to figure out, without sending them across the street to the Rite Aid Center, where the shopping carts don't go across the street, and it causes problems, and in the rain, and there's no covered parking, there's no covered area to be in, why we can't go back for a period of time until we develop this new location upon your recommendation. Mr. Rye, you recommended a new location at the south side of 5th Street, which would have to be properly addressed with ADA issues. I don't know, am I out of line with the rest of the commissioners in thinking this is a possibility to revert to our old level while we study and then perhaps ultimately select the recommendation that you've come up with for this authority? Mr. Rye, is that within reason, or am I missing something?
No, I think you frame it well. We can go back to the less safe and slower that endangers our pulse system and cuts into drivers' brakes. We can go back to doing that if that's the board's wishes. I think we can deliver this project in a matter of a few weeks.
The way you framed that is very sobering, too. I'm looking for a solution, and I appreciate that we have a problem here, and I'm trying to find a solution without stepping on too many toes and violating the pulse system and putting everybody's health and safety at risk.
Mr.
So you can appreciate where I'm coming from. So,
Absolutely.
Mr. Smith, rescue me, please.
Well, I don't know if I can rescue, but I will say, and I think Mr. Lonsdale kind of alluded to that during his talk, that your recommendation goes a long ways to solving some of the problems. The bus shelter, you're going to make it ADA compliant. You know, so I think your recommendation goes a long ways to at least trying to solve the problem. I would be inclined to suggest that maybe if you could leave it the way it is until you construct, you know, the shelter, and, you know, maybe go from there. I don't know if you can, Mr. Lonsdale suggested some rearrangement ideas. I don't know if that can be done or not with the I believe it was a shrubbery or something there. You know, certainly it's the best of the three options that Mr. Lonsdale pointed out, I think, what you guys came up with. I'll just throw that in.
Commissioner Short, your thinking?
I'm just thinking that there's just so many options to be considered there, but at the same time, like Mr. Lonsdale said, what happens in the meantime? It's pretty inconvenient for the users presently, but can we put this off for a few more weeks for the purposes of the study? Taking Mr. Lonsdale's suggestions, it's tough for the present users, but I don't see that we have really have a choice without jeopardizing the pulse system. I'm just looking at this big expanse of a parking lot and trying to formulate some ideas there. Seeing that the unused spaces that are away from Safeway, possibly we could get the city and Safeway to agree that, you know, the loss of, you know, 3 to 5 spaces would be a kind of a nice place to put a shelter, with the exception of walking across the lot during weather events. It would make it easier for the bus system to get in and out, and give the users still the opportunity to use the cart as they walk across the parking lot. I was just, you know, just going through some ideas in my head. Mr. Lonsdale's, excuse me, suggestion at the northwest corner of the building is what we were talking about earlier, in that fire lane there. The potential to block cars in there would be relatively short-lived. I mean, could we possibly put some signage up in front of those first few spaces that said, hey, at the top of the hour, or you know, 20 minutes after, however the pulse fell, you know, you may be blocked in for 5 minutes or something. I think that the users of those parking spaces would not feel that inconvenience parking in front of a sign there and just having the bus there. But it is difficult to make that decision. What do we do right now? Go back to what we have previously determined was unsafe, or do something that's pretty inconvenient for the time being? And I kind of think we don't have a choice there, but to keep being inconvenienced for the next few weeks while we figure out a better solution.
Commissioner Kine, any comments?
No, I think you guys have said it all. Just doing whatever we can to make sure that the stop is as close as it possibly could be to Safeway. In the rain, with groceries, and it's an ordeal.
It is.
You're not willing to dig yourself into a hole like Mr. Gitlin did here a minute ago?
Yeah, it's the cost of running. It's called the guillotine approach. You put your neck out there. Look, we're all here to solve problems, and you know, sometimes we think out of the box and it comes off cross. And what we're trying to do is accommodate the rider, and trying to find a way to balance that with public safety. I think that's, if I can frame it that way. I kind of thought the solution might have been toward finding a location in and around McDonald's in the back of the parking lot. That obviously didn't happen that way. The alternative became I guess the westerly side of 5th Street, the south side of 5th Street. But I see really here 2 courses of action. Number one, the recommendation and a motion to instruct our general manager to fully vet the possibility of changing the location to the one recommended by you. I see that as one course of action, which immediately starts the ball for our next meeting to say, we have good news for you, we have cleared this and we've cleared that, and we're on the way for approval. That's one course of action. The second course of action is what do we do in the meantime? And that's problematic. People are going, we're in the rainy season now, and people are going to be continuing to struggle with trying to get their groceries on into their carts, which don't go across the street because the wheels lock. And we're going to continue to inconvenience those people. So I see two things to do. And I see that as our options. Wait for the October meeting where you will come back and give us a good report on this new recommendation for location. And number two, keep the status quo until such time as we have that report. Commissioners, do we see that the same way?
I agree with what you said, yes.
All right, so I think we need, you need a recommendation for a course action to study this.
I think
Move forward.
I think we just got it, if you
Okay,
guys are...
consensus?
Consensus, right. And one thing, if I could add a couple of notes, Mr. Lonsdale brings up a bigger picture, a transit planning thing that Crescent City needs to come to grips with is, do we want a reliable clock face schedule, frequent service, as frequent as we're going to ever be able to afford, which is probably 30 minutes. Do we want that, or do we want to do like a dial-a-ride thing where we're going in every parking lot and dropping people off at every door, with the offset being we're not going to be, we'll be hourly instead of every half hour. That's a philosophical thing that we need to talk about. So I do suggest, and I've already put a couple of questions in our upcoming onboard survey, because it's easy for Mr. Lonsdale or myself to think we represent everyone, but we really don't. So I want to, with board support, we're going to ask a couple of questions about those sort of trade-offs. Is which do you prefer? Do you want an easy-to-remember clock face schedule that gets you pretty close to your shopping, or do you want to be dropped off in front of the door at the expense of the bus coming, half an hour later, because that's the trade-off. It's, because dial-a-ride's always there for folks that have a real mobility challenge that can't walk the 150 feet, and that's what we're talking about here, 150 feet, a bloop single. So we got to really be cognizant of that, because fixed route, the assumption is you have to be able to walk a little ways.
Right, and we don't know where their home is in relation to the stop that they're getting on.
Right.
So they've likely walked
Much further than 150 feet,
Much
unless it's
further.
right in front of your house.
much further than 150 feet to get on. And absolutely, encouraging activity and increasing a transportation plan, I think, is very important. But when you got your hands full of groceries, just for
Right.
this particular stop.
Yeah, it reduces your mobility if you're carrying 4 or 5 bags, for sure.
Exactly.
So I think Mr. Lonsdale's idea, the cart corral there, so I think the next step is we talk to Safeway, because we did meet, a lot of the project is in the public right-of-way. I met with our city engineers today, so we have the ability to do much of this, but we still need to stripe the pathway would be on Safeway property, and the cart corral, that was really a great idea, that would be on Safeway's. So we need their cooperation, so I think the next step is talk to Safeway, and
So
I'll be glad to
we do have
get started
direction
with that.
by consensus from this authority to move forward those discussions on your recommendation, on the general manager's recommendation to fully vet this new location. In the meantime, the status quo on the existing stop on the north side of 5th Street until such time as we'll have this re-agendized at the October meeting.
Thank you.
I'll open it up to the public one more time before we move on. We've done it before. Is there any additional public comment? Allow those to speak again. Mr. Lonsdale, if you want to have a response, or if anyone else wishes to address this issue. Again, I say this, we're here to serve the public. And if please come up, Kevin. If we are doing things which are trying to find solutions to problems people tell us about, then we're doing our job.
So I wanted to address the Safeway stop issue from the perspective of the operations side and giving the opinion of the drivers and of maintenance and so on. I can say that all of my staff that I've discussed this with, we are unanimously in favor of not going through the parking lot. Our incident recording process only requires us to document, officially document things if there is injury or property damage. But the general consensus of the drivers is that there's been any number of close calls where they've had to slam on the brakes because people don't pay attention, and they will walk out in front of a 5-ton bus without thinking about what they are doing. Regarding the other options that were mentioned, I mean, it's the only feasible way to go through the parking lot would have been the old way of coming in on the 4th Street side, because the buses don't have to make turns that way. Any other route that goes through the parking lot involves the buses making turns, which is very problematic, especially if we have to send a larger vehicle in. We now have some of the out-of-town routes that do provide service to Safeway now for the added convenience of the ridership, but out-of-town routes are larger buses because they might have more people on them taking groups to the river up at Gasky or something like that. And large buses have very wide turning radiuses. The tails can often swing quite far, and that creates a risk to pedestrians and to the vehicles there as well. So I was at the meeting today discussing the possibility of the stop being put in on the Safeway side of 5th Avenue. I think that's going to be the best route going forward, and a lot of the concerns that have been brought up by the public and the board were anticipated by Mr. Rye and discussed with the contractor we met with, so I think it's going to be very successful. And for the time being, keeping the stop on the Rite Aid side is, I think, the least bad option for what we have going forward. It has the ADA ramp, so we're compliant there. And as was mentioned, they're going to have to walk at some point. They're going to have to take the groceries out of the cart at some point. So it's really just a question of when. So I support the current plan for the board, leaving the stop where it is, and I support the new stop going into the discussed location.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on the subject, and Joe, please have this on our October agenda so that we'll make the inconvenience as short as possible while hopefully this authority looks to approve and move forward on the new location after you've vetted all of the challenges that are going to be presented to you after you meet with Safeway, etc. Okay, so we'll move on to item number 8, which is the approval, go back to item number 8, which is the approval of award of contract to Dr. John Shapiro for market research services in response to the 2017 Transit Market Research and Onboard Survey Planning Project. That's a request for proposal. Joe, please update us.
Thank you, Chair Gitlin. Well, we've alluded to this item a little bit in the last item, or maybe even in the one before that, but we, thanks to the generosity and foresight of the Local Transportation Commission, we got some funding. Our funding to update our transportation development plan is set up for next fiscal year. So 18-19 we'll be doing our plan. And I mentioned that earlier, that that's a great venue to talk about whether we do have too much geographic space to cover for 30-minute headways, and do we want to do this, and do we need new routes in this neighborhood, and that. So that's going to be a major planning effort. But fortunately, in talking with Tamara from the Transportation Commission, this year we were able to program these funds that we're about to award to do some pre-SRTP, pre-transit planning work, surveying the riders about what they like and don't like about the system and what they think we should be doing differently. And then following up with stakeholders, so maybe not necessarily riders, but community leaders and different industries that we've targeted, such as tourism, hospitality, and existing riders in the second phase of this project. It's called the Market Research Study, and the first phase is an onboard survey of the existing riders. So that'll kick off soon. We're trying to get ahead of the rain, although we didn't quite make it this week, but hopefully it'll clear up soon. They're ready to mobilize soon, so upon award today, I believe the onboard survey's queued to start as soon as next week, so to get in before things get wetter. That'll be a 3-day survey where they ride the buses with folks, hand out surveys, bilingual surveys, English one side, Spanish the other, asking a number of baselining questions so we can do this again in a couple of years and see how trends are in rider satisfaction, but then a few acute questions that deal with what we're just talking about today, like parking lots versus expediency, safety versus speed, that sort of thing. And also a couple exploratory questions about, do they want a route that goes to, say, Medford or whatnot. So some of the things that we'll probably be tackling next year in the planning process, we can get the public opinion of the current rider now. So that's, and I do apologize, I meant to print out that and bring a copy just to look at, but what I'll do is I'll email you a draft of the survey this week, but you got to turn around any comments you have to me about questions, turn it around to me very quick, because I think they're, like I said, they're getting ready to move ahead in the next week or two with the survey, so there's still time to fine-tune the questions a little, but I'm pretty happy with them in general. So the consultant, this was a sole response we got. The RFP was posted statewide on the CALAC website, on our website. We did have a fairly short fuse with it time-wise because we wanted to beat the rainy season, and the funding didn't become available till this fiscal year. So Dr. Shapiro's done these sort of studies before here in California, as has his subcontractor, which is West Coast Transit Solutions, which are all, they're very advantageous versus a lot of studies I've seen like this that use temp workers that are trained up real quick for about 2 hours and sent out on the bus system, and then all kinds of wacky things can happen, and the quality of data is compromised. Whereas this outfit is mostly bus drivers and transit advocates that really are, that they understand where the data goes and that decisions get made upon this data, so they take it very seriously. And these guys, they're very good at surveying riders, so they're comfortable on the in the transit environment. So I think we got one good proposal. That's why we recommend doing the sole source and moving on the project.
Commissioners, any comments from Mr. Rye on the proposal by Dr. John Shapiro on the survey?
Mr. Chair, I have one, please. Joe, I read the proposal. It looks very, very good. I like the idea that we're going to bring in, tourist focus groups and student focus groups. We talked as a board, and those are two very important areas to try to increase ridership. On the tourism, this isn't our peak tourist season, unfortunately. But do you have any idea about how they intend to recruit tourists to participate in the focus group? I was just curious.
No, I do, and I think the focus groups it'll probably be sideways right in for sure by the time that happens, because I think that's slated for more like November, December. They're going to use stakeholders to represent the tourist market, so I think they're going to, and any contacts that you guys want to forward to me, we'll involve them and invite.
Definitely the visitor center.
Yes, definitely.
I would do definitely the visitor center.
Right, so I think we'll use gatekeepers to represent the tourists, because right now we don't have tourists on our bus, so we wouldn't be able to, even if we went out there and tried to recruit them in July, there's just not many now on the system, so it wouldn't be that much better for us. They're in town, yes, we could maybe, intercept them somewhere, but they're not on the bus yet, and that's what our goal is, to get them on the bus. So yeah, we're going to go through local tourist and hospitality contacts that then can proxy for tourists.
Additional comments from commissioners? Commissioner Short?
No.
Okay. I have one having to do with costs on this. I see there's short-term planning research costs that add up to $21,900. Then I turn the pages again, West Coast Transit, and the total cost is at $12,000. This is a cost estimate. Can you address both of those costs for us, Mr. Rye?
Yeah, page 20 of the Shapiro proposal. That breaks out the total project bid is $33,900, of which $12,000 is the onboard survey that that'll be first, and then $21,000 is the exploratory focus groups and interviews process that follows later this winter.
Okay.
So that's the
are we
breakout
adding
between
those
the
two numbers together?
Yes.
Okay, so 21.9 and 12, is that what?
Yeah, and that's a not to exceed amount,
Now,
right?
you need board action to approve the expenditures of those monies at this time?
Yes.
Okay, we'll go to public comment at this time before we act on this proposal by Dr. John Shapiro. Do we have anybody in the public who would like to address this survey by Dr. John Shapiro? Seeing no public comment, we'll close it, and I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we approve the award of contract to Dr. John Shapiro for market research services in response to 2017 Transit Market Research and Onboard Survey Planning Project RFP.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second that with the not-to-exceed amount of $33,900.
Very good. So you identified in, Mr. Smith, Commissioner Smith, would you identify your motion as the total budget allocation is 33,900?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, and you've seconded that accordingly?
Yes.
Nicole, did you get that? Okay, thank you. Okay, then we'll take a vote.
Director Short,
Yes.
Director Crime,
Yes.
Director Smith,
Yes.
Chairman Gitlin.
Yes. Okay, so we'll move on from that, and you'll advise accordingly. Thank you, Mr. Rye. Let's go to item number 10, presentation and update on URAC Tribal Transit System activities. This is update only, so what's going on, Joe?
This was agendized again,
Yeah.
so that a representative from the Tribal Transit could come talk to us about what they're doing, and I reached out to them, invited them again, and I don't think they're here.
Come on up, sir.
Oh,
Come on. Okay, I think we have some.
oh, great, sorry about that.
Yeah, I saw. I just wanted that person to come and identify himself.
Come on up and talk to us, thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you for coming.
You knock on the door loud enough, it'll open.
Right.
Okay, so
I just thought you were here to talk about Safeway, sorry.
please identify yourself and your title and.
Sure. My name
Update
is Micah Gibson. I'm the Yurok Tribe Transit Manager,
Good.
located out of Klamath.
So what's going on with the URAC Tribal Transit System activities as it overlaps with Redwood Coast Transit? Do we need to work together? Are we competing with one another? Tell us how we can improve the service.
Not that I know of. So we've had one conversation with Kevin Hendricks before, because we knew that RCT was going to lose some of their routes in Klamath, and some of the folks that live further out in the rural areas, specifically the Klamath Glen. At this time, the transit service is a dial-a-ride only in Klamath. We're not running a fixed route, just because we know that there's a low ridership base there. It's very inconsistent, so we've stuck with that. We are looking to expand some of that. Some of that is tourism with the local hotel casino right there, things of that nature. And we're not opposed to working with Redwood Coast Transit to potentially pick up some other areas where there is a need that needs to be met that they cannot, but that's yet to be discussed.
Mike, do you feel that there's any area that this authority can address in helping improve service overall to residents in your area?
I have only heard from 2 residents in Klamath that lived in the Klamath Glen and worked in Crescent City that relied on that early morning route that went into there to bring them to Crescent City to get them to work. Those are the only 2 that I've heard of that have spoken up and said anything, even kind of through the grapevine, if you will. I haven't heard of a large impact due to that, just that route being gone.
Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Gibson?
Makes it pretty simple.
I just have one for Mike. So Mike, how was that gap filled when that service was cut? How was the gap filled? Did the passengers figure it out some other way to?
Yeah, they've been left to that. Our policy there being a dial-a-ride service, we service locally in Klamath, but we will come to Crescent City, but we must have a minimum of 3 riders. That's just a quota we have set, and that can be 2 coming from Klamath to Crescent, and then we're taking 1 from Crescent back. It just has to be a total of 3 riders in a complete round trip. That's all it is. And there was just that lack. It was really only those 2. And they were very early morning pickups, and we just did not have the capacity to go to their doorstep, pick them up every morning, and deliver them to Crescent City, where they were catching that fixed route earlier with RCT.
Additional commissioner comments at this time? The other area concerns me of people who need to use the doctor.
Yes.
And that would be a population that comes periodically. How we can help get people to the doctor in Crescent City from the Klamath area. And
Actually, we have a very good service for that right now. We have partnered with CRIB, the California Rural Indian Health Board, and they are providing 50% reimbursement
Okay.
for anyone who is currently Medi-Cal or partnership approved. So we have even transported from Crescent City all the way down to Eureka
Okay.
and back, and we're just keeping track of all of that to be reimbursed for fuel and staff wages. And so we currently do not have a need that's not met for people in Klamath getting to Crescent City or Arcata or Eureka.
Well, Mike, then you'd let us know if there's any issue that you feel we should readdress.
Sure, most definitely, and we would like to work with you guys as well to see if there is anything that we could be doing to help out as well. 'Cause
Very good,
I think
thank
we're
you.
both here to help serve needs in the community, and we can both work together to do that. It would be great.
Okay.
Mike, do people use dial ride service to move to a bus stop to get picked up by RCT?
Pardon me?
Do people use the dial ride to move from, say, the Glen or somewhere in the Klamath area to be taken to a bus stop to, in conjunction with RCT?
There are some that do, that will ride from the Klamath Glen to go to Peme to transfer over to RCT to either go to Arcata or to Crescent City, because they know they're one person and we need three. So they will make that, if they know your timelines, and they will catch that.
Good.
So we're definitely making a connection there to transfer those individuals.
Good. Good. Thank you,
Great.
Mike. Appreciate you showing.
There is one thing, and I don't know if this is the forum for it, but what we're kind of looking to do is potentially develop an MOU. So we're not using your bus stops currently, but we do have folks that we'd like to come in, and that's something maybe we would like to be able to work on. That
Well,
is it.
I think that's something you should have a conversation with Joe Rye on, about the development of that, and if there's a need and we can be helpful, then bring it back to our board.
And that would just be for things just like that, to transfer to get onto RCT. Instead, we're dropping them a block away just due to competitiveness and not having access to those bus stops. We didn't help with them, anything like that, but.
Yeah.
Okay.
Commissioners, do you have any feedback on the proposed MOU arrangement with the use of our bus stops? Do you have any issues with that you feel would be problematic? Okay. So let's move forward with the idea that, Joe, please keep in touch with Mike. He's your go-to person with the tribal transportation and how we can be helpful to one another, exchange your business cards, so that we'd like to have you back here whenever you feel there's a need to address something that this board can do.
Excellent.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
for coming. We appreciate it, Mike. Thank you.
You bet. All right, so that's item number 10. Let's move on to 11, which is adopt resolution 2017-1815, recognizing the service of Kevin Heckman of First Transit. Sorry to see Kevin moving on, but life goes on, and wishing him well. So, Joe, what is this? Update us on how long we have the talents of Mr. Heckman with us. Okay. Well, this is just a foregone conclusion. All right. I'll be happy to read this. Your service has been invaluable, Kevin, but Redwood Coast Transit Authority Resolution 2017-18-05. I guess we need a motion first to approve this, don't we? Kind of jumping the horse. Do I have a motion to approve this?
I move that we approve resolution, 2017-18-05, recognizing the achievements of Kevin Heckman as General Manager for First Transit Redwood Coast Transit Operation in Crescent City.
I will second that.
We have a motion by Commissioner Short, seconded by Commissioner Keim. Any public comment? Seeing none, please take a poll vote on this, Nicole.
Director Smith?
A definite yes.
Director Short?
Yes.
Director Keim?
Yes.
Chairman Gitlin?
That would be yes. All right, this is lamentingly a resolution of appreciation recognizing the achievements of Kevin Heckman as General Manager of First Transit's Redwood Coast Transit Operations. Whereas the Redwood Coast Transit Authority contracts out to the private sector for operations and maintenance services and relies heavily upon the skills and commitment of the local contractor general manager, who since June of 2016 has been Mr. Kevin Heckman, working for First Transit. And whereas the Redwood Coast Transit Authority received notice of Kevin's planned relocation out of Delmar County due to personal and family desire to return to Humboldt County, yet Kevin has remained at his position to ensure a smooth transition and keep projects and operations functioning at a high level. And whereas Redwood Coast Transit Authority has benefited greatly from Kevin's strong work ethic and keen leadership skills as operations and maintenance staff, professionalism, courtesy, safety, and morale have all improved notably under Kevin's guidance. And whereas Kevin Heckman has served in the key position for RCTA during one of the most difficult years of the transit agency's history and has assisted in the part-time RCTA general manager in many ways, keeping capital projects moving and providing operations data to support the many difficult planning decisions that RCTA has faced in 2017. And now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Directors of the Redwood Coast Transit Authority that the board officially acknowledges the exceptional work that Kevin Heckman provided to our transit agency in 2016 and 2017 and wishes him nothing but the very best of luck in his future endeavors. Passed and adopted by the Redwood Coast Transit Authority of the County of Del Norte, State of California, at a regular meeting of said commission of board meeting held September 20th, 2017 by unanimous vote. So Kevin, let's present this to you. Not so easy, Kevin. No, don't go back to your seat just quickly. When we give you a plaque, that means you have to come up here. And at least acknowledge that you have this plaque in your hand. So then you're going to come up and you'll do your report in just a minute. Item 13.
It has been an absolute honor. I never expected my career path to go this way. For those of you who knew me when I was in the banking industry, it's been a long, strange trip. I owe a lot of my success to the support of Don Swain and his team at First Transit. I owe an incredible amount to Joe Rye. He's been such a phenomenal wealth of transit knowledge. Somebody like me who's new to the industry to be able to learn so much from him in so short of a time, and it's been a pleasure serving the public. And I always I've tried to follow the the Boy Scout rule of campgrounds, where you have to leave it in a better place than it was when you got there. And I hope that I've done that and served the agency and most importantly the public well. So I appreciate the opportunity that the board gave me and that First Transit gave me, and I know that you are in good hands moving forward. The First Transit is looking for, I think they're interviewing 3 candidates very soon for my successor, and I have every reason to believe they will be very strong, qualified candidates who will continue the work that Mr. Ryan and I have started. So thank you again. It's been a real honor and a privilege.
Thank you.
Good luck, Kevin.
All right, so we'll move on to item number 12. We're going to come back to you, Joe, and then come back to Kevin again for his final operations verbal report. But let's go to you, Joe, on your general manager verbal report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be very brief. We received our, I believe before our last meeting, we received the first one of 4 new vehicles that we had ordered a few months ago, and the remaining 3 arrived shortly after our meeting that week. And unlike the first one that arrived with no issues and we put it right into service, these 3 have been a little more issue plagued and a little more work for Nick in our maintenance shop, because some of these, as it turned out, we're reusing the fare boxes and radios from old vehicles that are being sat down in order to be budget conscious and stuff. So that was more prep work than for Nick. And then unfortunately there was a couple of issues with them, so the 2 larger ones are not in service yet because there's an issue with their back door and the alarm not functioning and the back door is not staying shut, secure. So that's obviously a major issue. So I've made the vendor aware of it, and I'm sure our geographic location is not helping matters, but they have assured us they're going to take care of it. These are warranty issues that they should have never let the vehicles leave their yard in that condition. So yeah, that's been the delay. So I believe one of them's about ready to be in service. It just got its radio the other day. And that'd be the medium one. I believe it's number 220. But the two larger ones that are the 31-footers for the inner city route have been delayed. They're in the yard. You can come see them, but they haven't went into revenue service due to that backdoor issue. These vehicles all came with new set of cameras that are the same vendors compatible with the retroactive camera project that I'm about to tell you about. Bullet 2, concurrent with these new buses arriving, we spent some of our budgeted transit security money to retrofit all the other vehicles with camera systems. So now all our buses in revenue service have working camera systems from the same vendor. So for operations, that's a big deal. You only need one software to view them, one computer. So it's very, very good because since we've been working together for a year and a half, a couple of vehicles had cameras that worked and most of them didn't. So that's really going to heighten our ability to be safe, help investigate incidents as they happen, and it was approved earlier, but it'll also help us to enforce the code of conduct because the video is a wonderful tool for that. Video doesn't lie. So we're really excited about that. Next up is we're probably, by the time we meet again, the new gates will be in place at the yard, which will then finally secure our perimeter. Because as it is right now, we have fencing around about 85% of the yard, but that's not quite good enough. You can still walk right in. So the new gate project, we've got the quotations, we've awarded the work, and it's scheduled to start, I believe, next week. That one might be a little bit rain permitting, but that'll then get our electric gates. So then as the vehicles come in, they'll have communicate with the transponder, open the gate, come in, shut behind them, and then there's an intercom for pedestrians that walk up that they can be let in after they alert dispatch that they want to come in if they're on foot. So that's it's an exciting project, also paid for from the same transit security funds that Mark's been accumulating for a number of years.
Commissioners, any comments, questions, or input for Mr. Wright, General Manager Wright?
Just curious on the bus vendors, how long did they say they were going to be before they fixed the back doors?
Well, it took a series of emails over about a week to agree on who did what to who and how we're going to fix it. But now I think we got that. And then it was supposed to, the warranty guy was on vacation that was going to work with Nick, who's here. And I want to take this opportunity because I don't think we introduced him yet. So Nick West is our maintenance manager. And you've probably heard, you guys have heard a lot about him. He's been really a great addition to the team. Nick's here, and I want him to say hi to you guys. He's going to be potentially attending meetings in Kevin's place for a while if there's a gap on that, and we like having him here. And he can maybe update us a little. I don't think he knows anything newer than I do. We're waiting to hear back from the warranty guy on what the plan of action will be. Are they going to send a rep up here to fix, or they'll just send what Nick needs and have him implement it under warranty? That I don't know, but I wanted to introduce Nick to you at this time.
Joe's right, Nick. We talk about you behind your back all the time.
All good.
I love his shirt.
For the record, I'm Nicholas West, maintenance manager, been here since January. Been trying 9 months. I'm sure most of y'all have heard. As far as Unit 220, it's scheduled to be in service tomorrow. 210, or ND1, has been in service for about a month to 45 days now. Unit 295 and 294 are two bigger units. There is a safety issue with the back door, no alarm currently on, and we can go to grades with the active color building. So I've had a couple of emails, Joe's had a couple of emails back and forth with the vendor. And we haven't got confirmation yet as to when they will be doing that. I haven't known if the road will be there to accomplish the repairs that are necessary due to our geographical location. I've noticed it's a bit of a challenge to nearest large airport is Fort. So it creates a little bit of lag with getting parts, especially vendors who may not send them right away.
You know, Nick, I was kind of curious, if I can ask a question. Mr.
Sure.
Chair. I saw the cute little car the other day riding through town. That is really cute. If you guys haven't seen
Yes,
the new,
have
new-
seen it, yep.
very cute. How's that working out so far? Is that working out, is that reliable and has it been working out?
So far, it's been very good.
Good.
I have found one challenge, one perceived challenge, the vendors don't want to do it.
What?
Yeah.
Whoa.
I should say the manufacturer.
Really?
I'm trying to get service manuals for that vehicle. Penalties and kind of things that I actually have to repair that vehicle. I have the work specifications and whatnot to actually complete repair it. And in my process, I found out that I no longer build the vehicle. They stopped in fact, I think last year, right after the order was made.
Of course not.
I wonder if somebody else will pick up the slack. And I mean, it seems like a really good idea to, gives you some more mobility and flexibility, and it looks good,
I know our clientele really enjoys that little vehicle. Our fuel budget is going to definitely decrease because of that. It's getting roughly 15 miles to the gallon, where everything else is between 5 and 6. Our diesels are about 10. So it'll be a really big change overall in the budget. Cost of maintenance goes down. I actually spoke with Joe about trying to get us another one for that right system. Backup. The actual platform is going to be the difficult part for different parts.
Okay.
But the power plant and the transmission and all that is frozen.
Okay.
Parts are got to load here.
That's great.
Okay, Nick, any additional questions for Nick?
No, sir.
Well, nice to meet you.
Nice meeting you.
I appreciate it, and we'll move on to item number 13, and Kevin, you're back on. Your first transit operations verbal report.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the board. This does feel a little anticlimactic, coming up here without a second plaque, I suppose.
We'll see what we can do. If we get you for another meeting, we might do that.
How about
another
some
plaque.
donuts?
Donuts, okay. I would like to express my appreciation to the board for passing that resolution unanimously. That would have been very awkward if one of you abstained from wanting to give me that plaque. So the operational report, as normal, is the staffing is unchanged from last month. We still have 11 drivers and one trainee who is waiting on his DMV background check to clear. Once that happens, we can get him into training, and then we'll have a little more bench strength. Nobody on LOA, which is unchanged from last month as well. On the maintenance side of things, we currently have 2 vehicles that are out of service, which is the same number as last month, although they are different vehicles. One vehicle has been officially retired since our last meeting. It is now being used as just a spare parts bus, and eventually, I imagine Mr. Rye will look at auctioning it off and getting it off the property. And as you heard from Mr. West, we have the new buses slowly coming online as the issues with the manufacturer are worked out. For safety and service, we have had 2 complaints since last we met. One of those I would not consider a valid complaint. The guy did not like that we did not stop for him at a non-stop when he was vigorously waving his arms, but we do not do that for safety reasons. And the other one I think is valid. We extended the Front Street stop a little, and Joe discussed this with Mr. Weir from the city. This gives our buses a little more room to get on the route quicker for the red route, which goes down K Street. Unfortunately, the extension places a crosswalk in front of the bus. So if somebody is using that crosswalk, as soon as they will step out from no visibility into the right lane on Front Street, which is problematic. However, we have the support of Chief Minzel to ticket anybody who does not pay attention to that, and I think we're going to be looking at a different solution in the long run to find a good place for the transit center down there that is safe and convenient and allows us to run our routes. We have had no accidents of any kind since in the last month, which of course is great. Let's see, for the facility, we've gotten about a dozen loads of gravel brought to the yard to fill in the large gravel area west of the office that will help with the rains coming in to keep drivers from having to walk through puddles and so on to get their vehicles. The fencing project is probably going to be finished next week. I talked to the contractor today. They are constructing the fences. I guess that is how it is done now. They make the fences and gates and then bring them all up on a long trailer and put them in. So there we have it. So that'll increase the security and safety, help protect the RCTA's property, especially with all the new buses coming in and the improvements we made to the old ones, as well as provide additional safety and security for my staff. The access to the yard will now be controlled with a pin pad with an intercom for visitors to be buzzed in as needed. So we're very excited about that. On the community relations front, we had a meeting today with the workability program at the high school. We're going to be working with them in the upcoming months to get a high schooler to help wash buses, clean shelters, and so on, which will help with not only the appearance of the service, but it will also give a kid from our community an opportunity to learn some job skills and hopefully transition to the workforce when they are at that point. And that is what I have. I will entertain questions from the board.
Commissioners?
Do we still have that stop right in front of Verizon?
Yes.
The structure is still there?
Yes.
Okay.
It has needed to be removed. We've been attempting to work with the city and the county, and each of them wants the other one to do it. It's been an ongoing issue.
Okay. I just know there's an accumulation of trash.
Oh, yeah.
At that location.
Yes, it is a popular hangout for the transient population.
Well, Little Caesar's Pizza, it's a great place to eat your pizza out of the rain.
It's very convenient,
Yeah.
although it is more than 150 feet away from Little Caesar's. Yeah. So yeah, that is on the agenda to eventually get removed.
Okay.
It's just priorities and
I was just
making it happen.
checking in.
Thank you, Kevin. Any additional questions for Mr. Ackman?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you again.
And wishing you good luck.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin.
We'll move on to announcements, and I'll go to other commissioners first. I had a couple of things I wanted to add. Commissioners, announcements? No, sir. Okay. I had 3 items I wanted to talk to about. First of all, excuse me, I met with the manager of Surf Apartments, and that's Tony. I think you've met him before. He's asked for, can he sell tickets? Can he sell passes there? I said I'd get someone from operations to get back in touch with him. So Kevin, before you actually leave, maybe you can give Tony a call to see how we can be helpful to the patrons, to the residents of that facility, who a lot of seniors there who want to get a pass and save them the time of actually going over there. He wants to see how he can be helpful. So that was number 1. Number 2, in past months, this authority has entertained discussions with state and national parks regarding service into and out of the parks. Apparently the roads are deteriorating, and they would like some help. Now, this is kind of fallen off the radar screen, so I would like to see if this board is willing to entertain on its next agenda sending a letter to state and national parks asking for how we can be helpful in helping them. This becomes a funding issue. I'd like to have that matter consulted with our local transportation coordinator, Tamara Layton, to see if there is an ability for this authority to seek funding, ingressing and egressing the parks. so that perhaps over the winter months, we can have discussions where possibly we can move forward on that discussion. They approached us originally, and I'd like to see if this authority is interested in pursuing that again.
Mr. Chairman, the study that you're going to be doing, when is that supposed to end? Because it has a tourism component. So I would think that that parks discussion would be a part of that.
Okay, I'm all for it. I think originally the state and national parks approached this agency asking about assistance, and I think we had 1 or 2 meetings, and it didn't go anywhere.
Well, I think they wanted us to burden the cost.
Yeah, that was a discussion.
Yeah.
It was not even determined who would pay for it, but was there an interest, and then how do we pay for it? I think that was the question that never did get answered. Did we have the proper deployment of buses and what have you? But I think the winter months is the time to discuss it. So how does this board want to move forward? Do you want to agendize this item for discussion and recommendation to reach out, do an outreach?
So, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
If I can ask a question. So the issue is us helping them improve their roads or provide the transit service?
The latter.
Okay.
Yes. The roads are deteriorating. They brought it to our attention. They're going to have to fix their own roads. That's not our responsibility. They asked us how we can get vehicles out of the park, standard vehicles with 1 or 2 people in, and put a bus in there. And that was the discussion we initiated. The National Parks Director ended on moving on, retiring, and it dropped. So the question is, what do they want us to do? If they want us to entertain the possibility of bringing buses into, not fixing their roads, but bringing it, then how are they going to pay for this service?
Is there a new superintendent now?
I think we have an acting one, and I didn't know. I know that I don't know the status of where we stand on this, but originally the interest was from the state and national parks. They came to us. That's how I remember the conversation happened. So,
Is it possible to have somebody come and talk to us?
of course, I think we should invite them.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, I agree.
So maybe, Joe, you can put the invitation out there. I'd like to get the discussion going again. And if there is a tourism component that addresses this, that can be so addressed in the report. But we know that if we have a lot of cars in the Stout Grove and going in and out of there, it gets a little crowded in there in the summer months. If we have a bus that's going in there, even a small one, does a circuit, some kind of a route in there, you get 4 or 5 or 6 people out of their vehicles and into a bus, they can actually enjoy it a little more. They don't have to look around and say, oh, I'm driving, I'm going off the road here. Commissioner Kine.
Did we not do a little trial driving the bus through? Didn't somebody do that?
Prairie Creek Park.
I don't
Okay.
think we did the...
You didn't do Stout Grove?
No, we did do Stout Grove, yeah.
And it was kind of bumpy and difficult?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, the trial run, yeah. Yeah, I was on that. Yeah, conceptually it sounds good, but, the road is very narrow.
True.
There were spots where it just barely missed the redwoods by about 3 inches on each side. And, you have two-way traffic. To me, the only solution there is to have one-way traffic and fix the road. Because the road's, pretty, like you said, the picture is pretty bad shape.
Well, I'm interested in seeing if we can provide a service to the state and national parks. It's a tourism factor. Getting people out of their cars, that's a good thing. Getting them into a bus is a good thing. Getting them out of their cars and into one of our vehicles is a good thing. They can actually enjoy the surroundings much better than if dad is driving and mom's trying to keep the kids quiet. I kind of had a picture that this would be a plus for us if someone found the money to do this, but again, the conversation was dropped. So how does the board feel about moving forward on renewing this discussion?
Yeah, I think it'd be great to invite somebody from the parks to come and talk to us. I think that would be, and then the results, Director Keim mentioned the results of the focus group would be good too.
I'm curious what Kevin's thoughts are after taking the test run through Stouter Grove with one of our buses. Do you think it's an adventure that we shouldn't take due to damaging the vehicles or the such?
This was last December. My safety manager, Brando, along with Chairman Smith and his wife, we all went on a trip. It was a proof of concept. We wanted to took our largest bus on the grounds of that particular others. My opinion is that this is a very logistically problematic thing for RCTA to do. Chairman Smith brought up the one-way issue. I think when, I think it was in January of this year, that we had a meeting with two guys from the parks that Mr. Dillon was there for. I proposed 4 different possible alternatives to make it more feasible. One is to make it one way. One is to completely close it to private traffic and go like the 70 model where you have to take a tram into the valley. The roads would make it very hard on the buses so that we have increased maintenance costs as a result. In the past, we've had a lot of problems with getting any of the local towing companies to tow if we're on a gravel road. Of course, there's not a breakdown, but if there is, we need to make sure we have a contingency plan in place. That they have done it, but it's just very challenging due to the way the buses and the lack of traction. In fact, you can very easily let you get yourself in if you try to do too much throttle. I'm a short timer. You can take it for what it's worth, but if it were up to me, I would probably make the parks come up with all the money. Our funding is to do our core mission, which is to provide transit service to people who cannot afford cars in Delaware County, and this is their connection to the community. I don't know that there's a whole lot of those people going to that road. Hopefully the survey can shed some light on that. So if the parks were able to come up with the money, it would still cause logistical problems because they only want to run during the summer. So do I hire somebody, or my successor hire somebody for 3 months? What do they do for the other 9 months? We make work for them, and then I pass that on to the county to keep them employed so that I don't have to hire and train somebody every year. I mean, it's very challenging. My final suspicion is that if this were an attractive thing, the parks would not have a problem attracting a private bus company to provide this service. If there was really enough demand that people would be willing to pay for it. So I would encourage the parks to seek that out, and if nobody is interested, then I don't know that the public's funds through RCPA are best served by that. So I
Okay.
apologize for any.
No, I think we just, I want to put closure to the subject, or if in fact there's genuine interest to reopen it, I'd like to explore that. I never thought that RCTA should do any of the funding of these roads. I just thought that they would say, we want this service and we're going to pay for this service and deploy these smaller vehicles. It doesn't have to be the biggest bus. I think at that time we hadn't gotten delivery of some of our newer equipment. And I just saw that there was a possibility that we could address this. I see the challenges, doesn't mean it's impossible, but your advice is well heeded.
One final note, when we met with the 2 gentlemen from the parks, I had done a little bit casual Googling just to see if there was any grant sources out there for public transit in national and state parks. There were 2 programs that I was able to find. I passed the information on to them, and we never heard back from them. So I don't know if that means they applied for the grants and were denied, or if they didn't feel like doing paperwork, but they were very happy if we could go service, hard to say, but
Okay.
there you go. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Kevin.
All right, so at this point, is there any interest in inviting the parks to one of our upcoming meetings to see if there's an interest in having them present, and we can ask them questions? Is there an interest in inviting them?
Well, I think it wouldn't hurt to invite them. We
Okay.
talked about tourism. It doesn't have to be Helen Hill Road. There's other parts of the park that transit could go into. But, Director Keim is right about the survey and seeing what the tourists have to say about it too.
Okay. All right. Joe, you think by consensus, everybody let's invite state and national parks to make a presentation, whoever wants to come up, they want to accept the invitation. And on the subject having to do with ingressing and egressing the parks through elimination of their private vehicles and starting a service. I wouldn't discuss the funding, that's something that they would have to hear from us. If they so desire, thank you. Well, then we've closed the issue. Okay.
No, I think it's a good idea, and the timing's good because we can make them aware of the opportunity to participate in the focus groups on tourism so they can give us their input. And we can also talk about, I'm not sure, I think we updated the board, but we're serving into the visitor center at the park down at the beach, right after Oric there, so that we can get an update from them on how that's going. I don't know if we have a sign in there yet. I need to pull in there this morning. I was in a hurry, so I didn't. Yeah, it would be good just to cultivate that relationship with the new interim or whoever it is.
Okay. Okay, any other comments, questions, input? We'll just adjourn the meeting at this time. No motion, no second necessary. We'll seem by consensus we'll do that. So we are adjourned until our next meeting, which is Wednesday, October, what date is that, Joe?
I believe we would be on for the 18th. I don't, at this point, I'm not sure if we got a lot of things to agendize for that meeting, so we can kind of play it by ear. But if it's the board's wishes to meet for no matter what, we can. But it does, if there's not a lot of action items, we could maybe miss one.
I'm just kind of thinking ahead. I'm kind of doubting we're going to have a December meeting.
Yeah.
That seems to be the tradition. So it would be a possibility of maybe only one more meeting. So if you don't have enough agenda items to justify a meeting for 10/18, we'd go right before the Thanksgiving holiday.
Yeah.
So we'll go from there. Okay, any other questions? If not, we are adjourned.